Welcome to Stewardology, a podcast where two worlds collide. In this show, financial advisor Tim Russell and Pastor Drew Gysi are joined by me, producer Tyler Rutherford, to explore the intersection of financial stewardship and theology. Their unique perspectives help Christians and churches understand and apply a biblical framework for everyday financial decisions so Christians everywhere can grow in their walk with Christ through biblical stewardship. Before we get started, we just wanted you to know that the topics discussed in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations. Investment and investment strategies involve risk, including the potential loss of principal, and past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Securities and advisory services are offered through Genius Wealth Management, member FINRA, and SIPC. Without further ado, here are your hosts, Tim Russell, Drew Gysi, and Tyler Rutherford. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Stewardology Podcast. I'm Tyler, and I'm here with my host, Tim Russell.
Hey.
And Drew Gysi.
Hello there, guys.
Before we get started with the episode, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of a new resource we have to offer. Our parent company, Life Financial Group, has a podcast that focuses on weekly market updates. It's called Life in the Markets with our very own Tim Russell.
That's me.
So if you're interested in getting regular updates on what's going on in the stock market, in the investing world, and even what's going on in the life of our organization here, make sure you go subscribe to that podcast. The link is in the show notes.
Yeah, the videos are very short. We're usually sub 10 minutes. Yep. We're looking maybe 7 minutes is about an average that I've seen. And we talk about what's going on in the markets, maybe some lessons that we can learn from it, a verse to reorient ourselves. Comes out on Mondays. It's actually a video first podcast. You can get it audio in all the normal spots, but if you go to our YouTube channel and subscribe to the Life Financial Group YouTube page, you can see the video podcast as it comes out as well. Right. So I'd encourage you to go ahead and subscribe to the podcast however you prefer to see it.
That's right. It's a good piece of content. All right. So picture this. Let's get into today's episode. Picture this. You're sipping your morning coffee, and you're going through your normal routine, and you are watching for the Powerball numbers because you were suckered into buying some Powerball tickets. We don't recommend this. Do they even do Powerball in the morning? Or is that in the evening?
No, it's evening.
Yes, I don't even know.
So
enough.
It's your evening coffee.
It's
you're
your
sipping.
Evening coffee. That you're sitting and sipping.
Decaf.
There you go. Well, they pull the numbers, and you have won.
Woohoo!
You start to go cold sweats.
Yeah.
Your blood pressure is rising. You don't even know what to do because you've just won an exorbitant amount of money. What do you even do? You've had those conversations in the past. If I won the lottery, I would do this and I would do that. I would go buy this boat. I would give this away. But now it's coming to reality. What in the world do you actually do? Well, believe
first thing
it or
to do
not,
is pay your taxes.
Yes, that's important.
Uncle Sam going to get his first.
That's right. They're not going to let it go. But think about it. That's a big financial windfall, right? That doesn't happen to everybody. In fact, there's 1 in a 292 million chance that I think you'd actually get that. So let's just pretend that's not even reality for a second. But what is more realistic is you get an inheritance from your grandparents or your parents, and maybe that's a couple $100,000. Or maybe you get property from that inheritance and you sell that, and that might be worth $1 million. So financial windfalls, they're a little bit more common than you would think. All of us want a financial windfall, right? That'd be great. I'm not going to stop that from happening.
It's more common than the Powerball. Let's put it that way.
Way more common than the Powerball. Now, don't go play Powerball. We don't want you to do that.
We don't advise it.
It's a
Lottery is a tax on those who are bad at math, man.
Amen. But you notice people that win the lottery, they often they get all this money and it's gone. Right? They don't know how to handle a financial windfall. And so today's episode, for the more common situations, right? For the, what do I do with this inheritance? What do I do with this settlement? What do I do with this bonus? Fill in the blank? Yeah. What do you do with this windfall? So let's talk. Let's talk some ideas here, guys.
Well, I think you already mentioned some of them. And I think some of these windfalls that are common, you do have the settlements. It could be a legal settlement. It could be an insurance settlement. What about a bonus? I mean, if you're working with a big company, you could get a substantial bonus, nothing like the Jelly of the Month Club, So hopefully not the Jelly of the Month Club. That's not a substantial bonus. But maybe the sale of an appreciated asset. I have had the joy of doing stewardship reviews with people all over the country through our Life Institute. And it's interesting how I hear of people receiving different inheritances from an inheritance, a settlement, whatever. And we get this all the time. The inheritance, Tyler, you were bringing up offline here about the great wealth transfer. Talk about that for a moment.
Well, actually, this is kind of Tim's bread and butter because we talk about this in promoting The Good Steward, which is Tim's new book that's out now. But Tim, you had mentioned in an article that there are trillions of dollars.
$124 trillion of wealth will be transferred from one generation to the next, from one hand to the next, by the year 2048.
That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Huge.
Which means that there's most of that is, I would assume, in like wills and real estate transfers and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's a financial windfall. That's that people are going to be receiving. And I thought that was worth the conversation.
It is a great stewardship challenge and opportunity that faces the next generation.
That's right.
So what are some of the tips that we can do to handle if the Lord allows, because it is the Lord that allows us to have wealth, He gives wealth. If that wealth does come our way, how do we handle this?
Let's deal with inheritance for a minute. And the first kind of inheritance that could be received is real estate. Could be a house, could be farmland, it could be any number of real. Could be a like a hunting cabin up in the woods. The first thought that I have for you here, and this is, I don't think it's in the show notes necessarily, but think about estate planning concerns and potential challenges that property inherited in a different state in which you live could potentially generate. If you inherit property in, let's say, Minnesota, and you live in Pennsylvania, wonderful. We say praise the Lord for that. But if you then die with that property in Minnesota and your property in Pennsylvania, you'll have something called ancillary probate. Ancillary probate is when you have to hire an attorney in each state's jurisdiction in order to get the property settled, sold, and distributed to the next heir. It's costly, it takes time, it's also avoidable. So what I would say is if you don't want to deal with ancillary probate, well then, if you really, really want the property, you may want to look at getting a revocable living trust and placing your properties, all of them, your various assets, inside the trust. We have other podcasts that go into more detail about how that works. I'd encourage you to look at those. Or what you could do is you could consider possibly selling that property and transferring the money into property here in your own state. That would be through something called a TIC, a tenants in common transfer. There's a lot of rules involved with that, and I'm not even going to broach the how-tos of it because you need to do more than just listen to my voice saying, hey, it's an option. It's a way of transferring that money or that asset without having tax problems. Here's the other factor, though. When it comes to real estate, from a tax perspective, there's another really great thing that our current tax law provides for us. Let's just say your parents bought property at $1,000 an acre. And this was way back when. And now you've inherited it. And you've inherited it, and it's like $50,000 an acre.
That's still cheap.
Okay, but it's in the country, right? Or it's woodlands. So if they were to sell it at $50,000 an acre, we're talking about a $49,000 per acre growth or gain. That could be a substantially taxable event. If they leave it to you in their will, you receive a step up in the cost basis to the value of the property on the date of your parents' death, which means you could turn around and sell it the next day and pay zero capital gains tax. So it's entirely tax-free to you. So I don't think the tenants in common is a particularly good idea if you've recently inherited a piece of property, because there are no tax concerns. All right, so let's just talk about some other things. Is it land or a house? Is it rental property, or is it just raw land? If what you do with a house is really going to be dependent upon what you want to do with the cash. Do you want to turn it into rental property for a cash flow, or do you want to keep that sell that property and take the cash, the entire corpus, the amount of the value of the home, and use it in other retirement savings or invest in other properties in your local area, perhaps properties that are better. These are decisions that I can't make for you, but they're ones that you're really going to want to think through. So a lot of complexity when it comes to inheriting real estate. There's a lot of reasons why you're probably going to want to talk to both a tax and investment and an estate planning professional, depending on what you choose to do with that property, to make sure you're getting proper advice. There's a lot of ways that you could deal with inheriting property that could create problems. And I would tell you this too, if you choose to retain that property after you inherit it, I would really encourage you to get it valued so that you know what your new basis is, so that when you do eventually sell it, it's based on the new stepped up basis rather than, having to guess at a number. So another little piece of advice.
So what about cash? If you receive
cash
or an insurance death benefit, because that's a lot of people have life insurance and their heirs would receive a lump sum of cash. What about that?
Well, cash is a lot easier to deal with. First of all, cash inherited is tax-free. You can use it to pay off consumer debt, to build up your emergency fund in a high yield savings account, to max out your retirement plans like your Roth IRAs or fund your 401k. You can invest the rest in other various forms of assets, whether it's stock-based assets, real estate-based assets, or in some other business venture. There's a lot you can do with cash.
So let's actually put a real life situation here for a second. So let's say you have a couple in their 30s, and the male is the primary breadwinner. He's out working the job. The wife is at home taking care of kids, and that's a beautiful picture. But let's say something happens, and the husband has $1 million life insurance policy on him, and he dies early. Mm-hmm. And the wife receives that $1 million check. What should she do with that to ensure future provisions?
That's an entirely different situation and a different set of advice. Mm-hmm. The first thing I'm going to say is that death benefit really needs to be turned into a cash flow. So typically what we would do in a situation like that is we would look at the financial realities of that couple, the various assets and debts that they own, and we'd come up with a plan. Do we want to pay off the mortgage, or do we want to retain the mortgage and just pay a monthly mortgage payment with the cash flow that it generates? That's going to be dependent on how big the mortgage is. If it's like a $2,000 a month payment, but it's $50,000, pay it off. Mm-hmm. Because with $50,000, you can knock out $2,000 of expenses. You have done a very good thing. If, however, it's a large principal balance, and you probably would want to turn it into cash flow. We would then take that money and we would invest it into something that's moderate in its risk profile. So it's not super aggressive, not super conservative. We'd invest it to grow at 6, 7, 8% a year and take from the account 4 to 5% a year. The lower the withdrawal amount, the greater the likelihood that cash will well last into this woman's retirement and provide regular steady income. Generally speaking, for every $1 million invested, you can generate about $4,000 a month in income. So if her husband was making $4,000, he passes away, and you take $4,000 from a month from the life insurance, no problem. But if he was making $8,000 a month, now we got a problem because we're in a situation where the money can only sustainably generate about $4,000 a month, forcing her to have to go back into the workforce in some form or fashion if they have to keep that same lifestyle maintained. If they can reduce the lifestyle, again, that's all the better. That is more of a call towards the primary breadwinners, to the husbands out there. Make sure that your life insurance is sufficient to replace your income if you pass away. If you're making $6,000 a month, and that's what your family's used to living on, you should probably have $1.5 million of assets, either in life insurance and or retirement savings or other forms of savings. I really hesitate to say retirement savings. You know why? Because retirement savings, you can't take distributions from that until you're 59 and a half. Your wife could. There's a way that she could do it to generate some income out of there, but it would be probably problematic long term. In all of these things, when there's a death, there's life insurance involved. Because of the complexities and the various nuances, it's always wise to talk to a financial professional to make sure you're making the best choice for how to deal with your money.
That's really good. I know that's different than inheritance, so to speak, but I think it falls into somewhat of the same category.
It does.
It's a windfall of a kind. It's not the windfall anyone would want.
Right. So let's move into the next kind of windfall under the inheritance category, which is investment accounts.
Yeah. Well, there are two kinds of investment accounts. We have IRAs and you have non-IRAs. And we're going to talk about the non-IRAs here. We'll deal with the IRAs perhaps later. In a non-IRA investment account, typically speaking, these are stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, maybe ETFs, that are in a portfolio. You know what I told you about real estate, that there's a step up in cost basis at the date of death. That is also true for investment accounts that are non-retirement. In these cases, let's say your parents bought Apple at $1 a share, and Apple's trading at $1.25 right now, $125 a share. That's a huge gain. Good job. Your parents were really great investors. And now you have that same stock. You inherited it at $125 a share. Your new cost basis is $125 a share. You can either choose to retain that stock, or you can reinvest it, divest yourself of the stock and reinvest it in a way that makes more sense for you with little to no tax impact. You are only responsible for gains or can benefit from losses based on the price that you sell it for, less the price that it was worth on the date of the death of the former owner. Okay? So with an investment account, it's wise to rethink what you're doing with it. Now, there's the type of asset that you own is really critical, especially if it's a sizable amount. If it's all in mutual funds are great investments. And we've got other episodes that explain what mutual funds are and how they work. But in the case of inheriting mutual funds, it might be wise to take advantage of the fact that your cost basis is reset to the present value and reinvest those money, sell the asset and reinvest it into a ETF, an exchange traded fund, primarily because ETFs allow you to have less taxable events as you maintain that holding. So it's an opportunity at death to pivot into a more tax wise or tax sensitive investment format.
So talk about IRAs now. That's different.
Yeah, IRAs are entirely different. There's no step up in basis. Every distribution you take out of a traditional IRA is taxed as ordinary income. So if you inherit $1 million IRA, you are forced to take an RMD. That stands for Required Minimum Distribution. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, hold on, Tim, I thought RMDs were for old people. And I'm in my 50s or 40s. Why do I have to do an RMD? Well, the reason you have to do an RMD is because your parent or whomever you inherited that account from left it to you, and they are required to do an RMD. Therefore, the government says if you inherit an account, you have 10 years from the date of death to withdraw every penny out of that IRA so that we can finally tax you. Think about it from the government's perspective. They've been patient and long suffering with you for year after year after year, and they're waiting for you to finally retire, to get to the ripe old age of 73 years old so that we can put a gun to your head and make you take money out of your account so I can finally tax it, get my grubby little hands on that money. And then you up and die. How dare you? I still want to get my money on tax on that money. So now I'm going to put a gun to the head of all of your heirs and say you've got 10 years to empty that account. So a required minimum distribution for someone inheriting an IRA would say that you must take at least this minimum amount out of your account every single year, but by December 31st of the 10th year following the date of death, you must fully liquidate that account. If you fail to do so, there is a 25% tax penalty on the amount of money not withdrawn. It gets very expensive. Not to mention, you also have to pay tax on that money. So what we recommend for individuals inheriting traditional IRAs is that you do a little bit of tax planning. If you have kids in college and you need to defer income so that you don't lose benefits from the FAFSA form or something like that, it may be beneficial to either accelerate your distributions if you can do it in a couple of years in advance of your kids getting into college, or to postpone large distributions until they're later in their college years where it's not going to create a problem as long as you can do it within the 10-year rule. So that's where you have to do a little bit of tax planning with a financial advisor, tax professional, to make sure you can figure out when's the right time to take that money. Otherwise, if that's not a factor, you may simply want to take 1/10 that first year, 1/9 the next year, 1/8 the following year. This allows you to start spending down the account in a regular, kind of gradual way without creating some massive tax burden at the end.
Is that the same for a Roth IRA also, Tim? Or
No, it is not. So yes and no. The 10-year rule still applies to Roth IRAs, but there the math is entirely different. My advice, since the Roth IRA grows tax-free, only take the minimum amount, allow the large piece of that Roth IRA to stay in as long as possible, because the minute you take it out of the inherited Roth IRA, you have to do something with it, and it will be taxable no matter what you do with it. So it's not taxable as in, if I take $100,000 out, I realize $100,000 in income. It's a Roth IRA. There's no income tax on that. But let's say you take the $100,000. What are you going to do with it? You're going to put it in the bank. You're going to earn interest. Interest is taxable. You're going to take it and put it into a stock bond or mutual fund. Capital gains are taxable. Distributions and dividends, they're taxable. So all of those things create some tax drag on that portfolio. The longer you can leave it in the Roth, the better off you will be.
All right, Tim, the next one is annuities. This is actually, I think, more common than we'd think. Like my grandparents, for example, before one of them died, had an annuity. Yeah. So how do you handle that?
Well, so what do you do if you inherit an annuity? There are two kinds of annuities. You've got qualified and non-qualified. So it almost goes back to my point about investing. There are investment accounts. You have retirement investment accounts like IRAs, 401ks, Roth IRAs, and you've got non-retirement accounts. It's the same thing with annuities. Qualified means that qualifies as a retirement account. It's essentially an IRA and treated just like an IRA. Any money you take out of that annuity is taxed as ordinary income, just like any normal IRA. A non-qualified annuity is kind of a quasi, it's a retirement account that is not treated the same way as normal retirement accounts. You have cost basis in a non-qualified account. Again, how does cost basis work? You invest $40,000 into an annuity. It grows to $100,000. Your cost basis is $40,000. Any money that you, the person who purchased the annuity, or your children, the people who inherit the annuity, take out of that account is taxed as income first. It's taxed on a last in, first out basis. The last thing that went into the account is the growth. Therefore, that's deemed to be the first thing that comes out of it. You will pay tax as ordinary income on all of the growth of the annuity. Once you get through the $60,000 of growth and you're down to the $40,000 of basis, only then is the distribution income tax free. Hey, look, it's better than a IRA in that sense, but it's not as good as if the money was in a just traditional investment account that was non-retirement. Remember, with a non-retirement account investment, like the real estate or the stocks we were talking about earlier, you get a step up in basis at your death. With an annuity, there's no step up in basis. When you get a distribution from a taxable account, you pay capital gains tax if it was held for more than a year. That means you pay a lower tax rate. In fact, your tax rate could be as low as zero if you're within a low enough tax bracket, which is phenomenal. That's not possible with an annuity. Annuities are always taxable as ordinary income at your highest marginal bracket. So annuities are not a great thing to leave to your kids if they're non-qualified. We certainly encourage our retired clients who are in low income brackets to think about when they want to take those withdrawals and maybe pay a little taxes now rather than leave the money to your kids who are in a much higher tax bracket, forcing them to take or pay more of that money to the government.
That's a good point. So there's a second type of windfall, and maybe a little bit less common, but certainly exists for many reasons, but that's legal settlements. So why don't you walk us through different kinds of legal settlements and maybe how we can take those funds and put them to good use?
So why is that there are two kinds of everything we're talking about? I feel I'm Noah, and we've got two kinds of every animal coming into the ark. We have two kinds of tax or legal settlements. We have tax-free settlements, and we have taxable settlements. So when you get a settlement for a loss, this is maybe a legal settlement. Someone destroyed your property, and there's a settlement for that. That settlement's generally tax-free. You don't have to claim that as income on your tax return. If, however, you get a settlement for pain and suffering, that's actually a taxable distribution. That is reported to the IRS, and you are required to pay taxes on it. So know what the tax status of your settlement is. Many little things here and there. Settlements are probably not problematic from a tax perspective. If you have a large settlement, if you get, again, this is more of the legal settlement kind of arrangement, these things can be much more taxable. So talk to your legal and tax professionals to know what you're dealing with. Another kind of settlement, this is kind of going into type 3, is what about a divorce settlement or alimony settlements? This is also a legal settlement, but depending on the nature of the settlement, it could also be taxable or non-taxable. Alimony generally is considered a taxable payment. This is where husband and wife are together. The wife was not the primary breadwinner. The husband was. So she files for alimony support, which means he has to provide financial support to her for a certain period of time. That's a predetermined amount the courts and the attorneys agree on, settle on. That amount to the wife is taxable. It's reported as income. And it's also deductible for the husband. He's able to deduct that from his income. So there is alimony that can have some tax impacts depending on which side of the alimony payment you're on. But other kinds of settlements, like from a retirement account, this is called a quadro or a qualified domestic relations order, could involve a distribution from a retirement plan or a pension plan. And if rolled into another qualified account, like an IRA or something like that, it's not taxable at all. So that is not a taxable event, not taxable for the person that the money came out of their account, not taxable to the person that received that money into their account, again, provided that they're not spending it. It's staying inside the tax shelter of their IRA.
Keeping you going, Tim. Windfall number 4, stock options, RSUs, IPOs, AYZ, XYP.
Those things aren't things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, okay. So stock options. Oh, man. So we've often find stock options are things that are provided to employees of publicly traded companies. So you work for a bank or for a tech firm, and its stock is traded on the market. Or maybe it's a startup company that is looking to create an opportunity for their employees to gain financially if they ever do IPO. They may grant options at a particular price. So an option is the right to purchase a stock at a predetermined price. Let's just use a public company and say the stock is currently at $10 a share. The company's going to go to his employees and say, hey, as a bonus, we're going to give you the right to buy stock at $9 a share when it's currently at 10. We're going to give you the option to do that. Now, you can't exercise that option for 4 years. When that option becomes fully vested and it's available for you, you can choose to exercise that option. Now, here's the thing. If the stock price is at $8 a share, you're never going to choose to buy it at $9, right? That just doesn't make sense. You go to the market, if you really wanted it, you buy it at $8. But let's say the price is at $80 a share. Well, I would love to buy the stock at $9 a share or $8 a share. That would be beautiful. Because if I can buy it at $9 a share and it's worth $90 a share, I could make a very healthy profit. Now, here's the thing. From a tax perspective, stock options have different tax treatments. There's the fast way, that's more taxable. There's the long way, that's less taxable. The fast way is when you say, hey, the stock price is at 80. I have an option at $9. Give me the difference. I'm just going to exercise this option, and I just want you to turn around, sell it on the open market, and give me the difference. That difference, the $71, is taxed as short-term capital gains and therefore is taxed as ordinary income. So it's more taxable if you say, just give me the difference between my option price and the market price. A lot of taxes. If, however, you say, I want to buy it at $9 a share, and I'm going to hold on to it for a year. Then you sell it after a year. By the way, option B means you have to put up the money to buy it at $9 a share. So you have to have some money involved to make that happen. It's not free. You put the money in the market at $9 a share. In a year, it's worth $88 a share. You get long-term capital gain on $79, which is taxed at a much lower rate. Taxed at maybe 15%, maybe a little higher depending on how much your income is. So stock options are great. Just recognize if you operate with the cashless option, it's going to be more expensive. If you purchase it and hold 12 months, it'll be less expensive. RSUs, that's the other thing you said. That stands for restricted stock units. In lieu of a stock option, they may grant you restricted stock units, which means I'm going to give you shares today at today's price, but you can't sell them until they vest, until 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. At the end of that period, when those shares go live, where you're actually able to sell them, at that point, it becomes taxable to you at the value of those shares. So if they grant you stock worth $10,000 and you can't sell it for 4 years, and at the end of 4 years, that $10,000 is worth $40,000, you get $40,000 reported on your W-2 as wages, and those wages will kick up how much tax you have to pay, how much tax they're going to deduct. So be aware of RSUs. They're great things, but they're also, they can create more tax problems. I often have clients coming to me and they're saying, my company is giving me the option. Do I want to take my bonus in stock options or RSUs? And I often lean towards an RSU rather than an option. RSUs, you're guaranteed to get something as long as the stock has value. In a stock option, you simply have the right to possibly purchase it at a price in the future. And if the price is really high when the stock option's coming out, I'm hesitant to say take the stock option, because if we have a recession and the price drops 20%, the stock option is worthless. So I'd rather take the cash in the RSU than the stock option. However, if the stock is really low, I would much rather take the option to purchase the stock than the RSU, because I can gain a little bit more and have it more tax friendly if I choose to do it via the stock option than the RSU. So there's a little bit of math involved. That's another reason why you get involved with a financial professional to help you think through these options. The final, if you're still awake and still listening, the final of these
Can you tell
acronyms
Tim,
is IPO.
Can you tell Tim gets excited about these things? I mean, look at the smile. Look at the smile on his face.
It's fine.
Well, you might be thinking now, we're talking a lot about taxes. What am I going to do with the actual money? We'll get to that in a little bit. But taxes are
tight.
very important to discuss, though.
So
You're going to make your decision about what you do with it when you know what the tax impact is.
That's right.
So Windfall 5, winnings.
Well, I was on IPO. Haven't addressed IPOs yet. Let me
let's
say
do
something
IPOs.
very quick. An IPO stands for an initial public offering, typically offered with startup companies. This is a company that's not yet gone public, has not yet offered its shares for sale on the public markets. And here with IPOs, that you can get a huge windfall when that goes public, and all of a sudden you had these 10,000 shares that were fictional in value. Like, I have no idea what it's worth, and you gets to the market and you're a Facebook employee, and now all of a sudden that $10,000 in shares is worth $500,000 in value, or $1 million, $2 million in value. You could go from pauper to feeling like top of the stack overnight. And I caution people who get IPO money from being too cavalier. First of all, there are tax impacts with what you do with it. When you sell it, there will be capital gains issues at play. So talk to a tax advisor. Number two, go slow. Don't go buying people houses. Don't go buying big cars and fancy houses and fancy things yet. Pause. Slow down. Give yourself a little bit of time and perspective to make a wise choice based on your priorities. We'll kind of get into what those priorities are here in just a moment.
So Windfall type number 5, we go back to my scenario in the beginning. Winnings.
Which we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, exactly. But people play it and people do win. What would you do?
Drew, why don't you read this passage from Deuteronomy 23, verse 18.
You shall not bring the fee of a prostitute or wages of a dog into the house of the Lord your God in payment for any vow, for both of these are an abomination to the Lord your God.
First thing, don't play the lottery. Just don't. Second, if you did happen to succeed, pay off your debts. Never go back into debt. So use the money to help improve your financial life. Have some reserves. Don't go back into debt. I would also say that lottery winnings are the people that win the lottery are the ones who are often the worse off after they win than before they won. You may say, well, how is that possibly true? The reality is financially they're worse off because they never developed the discipline to know how to cultivate and care for the money that they won. It was money won quickly, flees quickly. Money that grows over time, that grows slowly, often we appreciate it more. We know how to keep it more. We know how to maintain it, how to use it. We know the value of that money, because we understand the value of the work. So I really dislike the idea of playing the lottery as an actual way of making money. If you do happen to win, someone gives you a lottery ticket and it's a win, pay off your debts. Don't go into lottery. Careful about charitable giving or tithing. I think that there's... we talked about this verse from Deuteronomy that talks about ill-gotten gains are not honoring to God if they're given to him. You can't satisfy God's righteousness by giving him your ill-gotten gains. And I kind of put lottery in the ill-gotten gain category. It's not as bad as the fee of a prostitute, but it's not good. So I'd be cautious about that. I would, if you're feeling like you really want to do something charitable with the money, yes, be charitable with it. Just be aware, some churches are going to be very hesitant to accept lottery winnings as a donation.
Yep. Interesting. The Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards indicates that nearly 1/3 of lottery winners declare bankruptcy within 3 to 5 years.
Yep.
Fascinating stat there.
Yeah, Tim hammered debt pretty hard in this section, and it's important to notice because we can almost guarantee that you have debt if you're playing the lottery.
So if we look at signs of success, financial success, it's never lottery playing.
Yeah.
The people who play the lottery are the ones who are not financially successful, which means they're not living on a budget. They're not living debt free.
Yep.
Just my observation. I've never seen someone drive up to the gas station in a Rolls Royce and buy out their stock of lottery winnings.
Yeah.
Or lottery tickets.
The get-rich-quick schemes never really seem to work out.
Now, I think what we're talking about is those lottery winners is people that are consistently in their, whatever their income is, they're going out and they're buying tickets on a regular basis on stuff. Now, you got to bring in that caveat where when the Powerball is $1.2 billion, people will roll up and spend, what is it, $2, $5, whatever it is for a ticket. If you can do $2, I mean, yeah, don't do 10. You can use that money more wisely for something else. We're talking about that consistent lottery player. If you,
I wouldn't even do it.
Well,
I wouldn't even go there.
Yeah.
Don't play the lottery, period. I mean, even if it's that high, because remember, we're now participating in a system that keeps people in poverty and ruins people's lives. So it is
that makes sense.
The desire for more, the desire for get rich quick that the lottery generates and fuels. I am vehemently opposed to all lotteries.
So I guess I can't hand out lottery tickets
No.
for birthday presents
Or
in the
Christmas,
office.
no.
Christmas.
Don't put a lottery ticket in my Christmas card, please.
Guess what you're getting this year, Tim?
The Jelly of the Month Club. All right, moving on. Moving on.
We talked a lot about the tax implications of a lot of these kinds of financial windfalls. Now, you might be wondering, yeah, let's get to the juicy stuff. But the reality is the way these things are taxed impacts how much you actually receive, and it involves some wise planning. And so I want to ask Tim, what are some principles that we can derive for how, okay, we've gotten the windfall, we've paid the tax, the money's in my pocket. What do we actually do with it now?
Yeah, just a proverb to keep in mind. I alluded to it earlier, but let me quote it for you. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. That's Proverbs 13:11.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind. Now, some of what you're going to do may depend on the size of the windfall. The most common is probably the smaller windfall, sub $1 million. First of all, I would say bring a financial advisor in to help you make decisions that are wise and aligned with your priorities. Always consider your tax impacts and make sure before you do anything with that money, because we're dealing with such large numbers, you always pay your tax bill first before you spend anything else, because one of the reasons why people declare bankruptcy 3 years after they receive a massive winnings is because they forgot about the IRS, who is deeply interested in their winnings and will require their own portion. And if you start spending all of that money and you don't have enough money to pay the tax bill, that's what gets people into big, big problems. So always pay your tax bill first. Be charitable in your thinking. So there are two ways to do or to think about charitable giving. Number one, give off of the sum that you get. So I receive $100,000. I'm going to give $10,000 to my church or nonprofit organization. That's a great idea. That can be a very good way of being generous. There are, however, certain types of assets and certain timing where those assets can be better or worse to do that from. So if you inherit an IRA and you have to take a distribution, an RMD, you can't do a qualified charitable distribution if you're not 70 and a half. So you would have to take the distribution in cash, pay the taxes on the distribution, and then donate the cash if you were going to do that from an IRA. So just be wise about that, because anything you take out of there is tax ordinary income. If you could hold off until you're 70 and a half and do a qualified charitable distribution, a QCD, that's where the money goes directly to the charity. It's actually better for you from a tax perspective in most circumstances. The next option would be, well, why don't we just give off of the income? I don't want to give off of the top. I want to invest all of that money, but out of the income that money generates, I'm going to tithe off of it. So if you invest $500,000 and you're taking $2,000 a month, you can tithe off of the $2,000 a month. Again, I'm not going to take the role of the Holy Spirit here. I'll let you wrestle with the Holy Spirit about what you should or think you want to or should do with those funds and how you give, but that is a legitimate option. You can give up front, you can give as you go, you can do both. So there are lots of ways to look at it. Don't look at the question about charitable giving based on what's the smallest amount that I can do to keep God happy with me. Give as it has been given to you.
So we talked about considering taxes first, because that's really important, especially with windfalls. And we talked about charitable giving. And I know that the sub $1 million windfall is probably the most common. Can we talk about the sequence of, okay, like when do you pay off debt, build up cash reserves, put money in retirement, maybe have some fun money? Like where does that fall into the taxes and the generosity?
No fun.
Yeah. So first thing you do is emergency fund. Fund your emergency fund. Second step, pay off all consumer debt. So that's your cars, your home equity loan, not your mortgage. Your credit cards, student loans, pay it off. If you have money left over after that, I would be funding Roth IRAs, funding 529 plans for your kids, setting aside money for retirement, and then I would focus on the mortgage. I'd pay off the mortgage. And if you're going through this process, you've built your emergency fund, you've paid off your debt, you've started saving for retirement. At that point, I would say, improve your home. Mm-hmm. If you're going to do a kitchen renovation or repave your driveway or some other form of larger capital expense, improve your vehicles, upgrade your vehicles, I would do it at this point before maybe paying off your mortgage. If you want to take a family trip and vacation, it's not wrong to do that. You can earmark a certain amount of money, $5,000, $10,000 to go take a trip and to do something memorable, but just don't fritter it all away. Mm-hmm. Again, a lot of what you're able to do is depending on the size of the inheritance and the size of your financial reality, how much debt you're carrying. But those are the things that I would generally tick off in terms of priorities.
That's helpful. Nice. So what about larger windfalls, maybe $1 million plus?
So if you're dealing with that, guidance, again, from a tax and investment professional can be really, really important at this point. There are bigger amounts of money that could possibly be invested, therefore more potential tax complications that arise from that, which is not a reason to avoid getting the money, but it's all the more reason why you need to bring people in, because if you do something wrong with that money, the tax impact could be unpleasant. So my advice to you is just tick through all of the things I told you before. Emergency fund, pay off your debt, save for retirement, have a little fun, improve your home, upgrade your vehicles, pay off your mortgage. And then after that, I would focus on thinking about, do I want to give even more? Do I want to use it to invest in a business opportunity or changing my career options or getting more education? Use the money to improve your life and your world. Again, we're dealing with these large windfalls above $1 million. That's where you can also think about, what do I want this to do for my broader family, for my kids and for my grandkids? There are lots of decisions that we can make with regard to that. But really, once we get north of $15 million, we call that the super large windfalls. That's where there's even more concern that we need to play in estate planning and charitable giving because of the dreaded tax man. Once you're above roughly $15 million, you're now entering into the area where you have federal estate tax concerns coming into play. If you're married, we could probably, with some proper estate planning, not really get too worried about that until you're maybe closer to $30 million, because you can double your lifetime exemption. The federal estate tax comes into play when you're roughly $14 million right now. So at $28 million, if you're married, that's where anything above that you probably need to worry about. I would say everyone needs to worry at $14 million unless you've done a little bit of tax planning to make sure that, or estate planning to make sure that you're qualifying the maximum, or protecting the maximum amount of your estate. But north of that, you have broader concerns at play. Again, I sound like a broken record. This is where you got to talk to people. Don't go cavalier into all of this. There are charitable giving things you can do. If you have assets north of $28 million, north of $30 million, if you're single and it's north of $15 million, you really need to consider, well, how much of this do I want to go to my family versus how much of this do I want to go towards your heirs, or towards charity or towards taxes? Because if you leave it all to your kids, the tax man's going to take like 40% of that. Anything above the $13 million, $14 million, the tax man's taking roughly 40%. So what you do with charitable giving may significantly reduce the amount that goes to the government and increase the amount that is used for the better well-being of the world through the charitable endeavors that happen.
You know how most kids have monsters in their closet and they're afraid of the scary monster? Tim's is the tax man. The tax man is in your
The
closet.
boogeyman, he come and get you.
You can see that by his face every time he talks about it.
Yeah. Well, I think about Proverbs 16:9. It says, the heart of man plans his ways, but the Lord establishes his steps. Yeah. And whenever we're dealing with larger inheritances and larger situations like that, it's absolutely wise for us to make our plans, to work with professionals to get the help, but also acknowledge that the Lord is the one who's going to establish our steps. He's going to make it successful or not successful. We can trust in him. He's good.
So that financial windfall can feel like a golden ticket of sorts, right? But as Proverbs 13:11 reminds us, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. So these instances of sudden wealth can certainly test our stewardship. And it's not bad to receive an inheritance or something like that. It's a great thing. That means someone else planned really well and they were thinking of you. That's pretty special.
It is.
But we have to be careful because we don't want that to just vanish or be used improperly or unwisely. So all of these things that we've talked about, whether it's considering taxes, considering charitable giving, to paying down your own debt, helping your own household improve, all these things are important to consider instead of just blowing it all on maybe a vacation or a super nice car. That's in my opinion, a really silly way to handle that. So don't let excitement or greed drive your decisions. Instead, like Tim said earlier, let's pause and pray and carefully consider and plan what we want to do with this increase.
All right. Until next time, take care. God bless. And remember, playing the lottery is a tax on people who are bad at math. Don't be a dummy.
Thanks for joining us on the Stewardology Podcast, where financial stewardship and theology meet. We'd like to help you take your next steps in biblical financial stewardship. Subscribe in your podcast provider to get the newest episode delivered to you every week. Leave a 5-star rating and review to help new listeners find the show. Take advantage of your free personal stewardship review at stewardologypodcast.com/review. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website at stewardologypodcast.com for tons of free resources and hundreds of free episodes. You can also leave episode ideas at stewardologypodcast.com/idea. Remember, Psalm 20, verse 7, some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. See you next week.